We're now going to look at how to actually work out the inverse of a function and grab its domain and range. If you haven't read the question already, just pause the video and have a quick read. Okay, so here's our function, there's the domain. We're asked to find the inverse of it and the domain and range of the inverse. Before we start, we actually need to get the range of our original function as well. To get the range, we need to sketch it. So I'm going to sketch f of x. It's not too bad, it's a parabola. It's been shifted down by 7. There we go, it's coming down at -7 there. Alright. But it's only defined for positive x and 0. So I'm going to get rid of this left side of the parabola. Brilliant, alright. And we'll use our graph to get the range of f of x. In the last video I gave an example where you could imagine, if you're struggling to find the range, you could imagine moving along the curve as if you were riding a roller coaster and you're firing a paintball gun at the y-axis horizontally. And your range is wherever the paintballs hit the y-axis. Another thing you can do, if it's a continuous curve to find the range, is take your finger and put it on the lowest point on the curve, which is there. Read your y coordinate, so for us that's going to be -7. And then put your finger on the highest point on the curve, which is here for my sketch. Don't know if you can see that. It's here for my sketch, but you can probably imagine this parabola keeps going up and up. So in fact, this keeps going up to infinity. So that is our range there. I'm just going to write it the other way around. In fact, I'm going to write it up here. Cool. Alright, so far we haven't done anything with the inverse. We know the domain and the range of the original function. Okay, now put that to one side, it's going to come in useful later. Now to get the inverse of this. Okay, it's a method. First of all, let y equal your function. Then swap y and x. And you then look to make y the subject. Okay, so let's make y the subject here. There we go. Okay, once you've made y the subject, that is your inverse function. So I can say that statement there. I've got my inverse. Okay, now we just need to get the domain and range of the inverse. Well, if you remember from the last video, the inverse maps the range back to the domain. So the domain of the inverse will be the range of the original function. But I'm not going to write f of x here exactly like that, because I'm talking about what I'm putting into the inverse. I write exactly the same inequality, but with x here instead of f of x. The range of this, right, what's it mapping to? Well, it maps this back to this. That's the range of the inverse. And instead of x, we're going to have that there. Okay. there's your inverse function, there's the domain and the range. Next up, we need to sketch the inverse function. So I'm going to use this sketch here. Alright, now in a previous video, we said that to sketch the inverse, you simply reflect the original function in a line y equals x. I'm going to draw y equals x. There we go. Okay, and then if you find it difficult to reflect it, what you could do is maybe just move your paper so the reflection line is vertical. You might find that a bit easier. Or you could imagine this kind of like the middle of a butterfly, and the wings of the butterfly are going to be symmetrical either side as they flap. I don't know if that works for you or not, but anyway, that is what our inverse curve should look like. So let's label it. In this particular example, it was a bit easier to sketch the inverse because we know it explicitly down here. So if you're familiar with root x, you can just sketch it. Okay. Alright. And that is how to find an inverse function. Okay, some of you may have realised that when we're working out the inverse, we had to square root on one line from here to here. And when you square root, you have to take into account the positive and the negative root. So I should have actually written this, plus or minus in front of the root. Yet I didn't. Why not? Well, in fact, we are only looking for the positive root, and you know that because the range of the inverse is here. We know it has to map to a positive number, hence we can discard the negative root.